Thank you everyone for coming here today. My name is Hoe Fang and I represent Function 8. Function 8 is a social enterprise set up to share their experiences of the past with the new generation. And we have, through our talks, engaged with many young people, and we found it a very, very interesting experience, learning from them and hoping to transfer our knowledge to them. Why do we then take on this particular event to remember the Marxist 1987 conspiracy? It sounds like a political event, but I can assure you it is not just a political event, because it affects every one of us. It affects your children, it affects your parents, and it affects your friends as well. That's the reason why we thought that we should share this part as one of the events in our society. I'll just tell you 4 stories why I'm up here today and why we decided to take this on. The first story is about a historian. She's passed on now, a couple of years back. Her name is C.M. Turnbull. C.M. Turnbull was a very well-regarded historian, and her book, A History of Singapore, 1819 to 1975, was regarded as the definitive history text for Singapore undergrads, for students and in tertiary education, in tertiary institutions. Now, C.M. Turnbull, the late C.M. Turnbull, went on to, before I go into that, she also wrote a book called The Straits Settlement, and this book was instrumental in the citations used by the government of Singapore to reclaim Pedro Blanca in the International Court of Justice from Malaysia. Right? It was instrumental. So her documentation of history is, modak thing lah. Yeah. Now, the thing now is this. She went on to update the history of Singapore, and she said, and she called it a history of modern Singapore, 1819 to 2005. And on page 338 to page 339 of that particular book, she looked at the Marxist conspiracy, discussed it, dissected it, and came to the conclusion: the so-called Marxist conspiracy is a myth. It's found on page 339 of her book, A History of Modern Singapore, published by NUS Press, available at select bookstores. Right? My second story is a story of friendship, a story of ideas, and a story of networks. Many people remember Lim Chin Siong, Fong Sui Suan. These were the people who fought for independence against the colonists, right? They have gone now from the stage, but many people did not realize that there is a Mr. Yu Chu Yip. Mr. Yu Chu Yip is best known, or best remembered, he's passed on again, for being an economics student at Raffles College. He was the secretary of the Malayan Democratic Union, which was Singapore's first political party after the Second World War, and the leader of Singapore's underground communist movement in the 1960s. He was such a powerful man. He was even the superior of Fang Chuang Pi, the plan. This was the guy that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was in discussions with to discuss how to overcome the British. And he was so powerful at one stage that some students thought that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was the plan. But no, the plan, it purportedly asked Mr. Chang Yu Tong, whom the communists had planted in David Marshall's Workers' Party, to resign from the party and allow the PAP to win in the by-elections. Mr. Yu Chun Yip. Why do I mention him? Because when he was on the run, when he was one of the most wanted men in Singapore, he was sheltered by the late Mr. S. Rajaratnam. he was offered shelter by the late Mr. S. Rajaratnam, who was a deputy prime minister, who went on to become a deputy prime minister of Singapore. Subsequently, after he escaped from Singapore, he went to China. He then wanted to come back to Singapore. And what did happen? He spoke to the late Dr. Goh Keng Swee and asked to return to Singapore. The late Dr. Goh Keng Swee was a close friend of his from Raffles College. He returned to Singapore. Now, again, why do I say this? Were the late Dr. Koh and the late Mr. S. Rajaratnam part of a communist network in Singapore? Absolutely not. They were men of passion and conviction with their ideas. Just different ideas, but they valued friendship. What would have happened if the British had concocted a story about both our late and esteemed deputy prime ministers as being part of a communist network? What would Singapore be today? Political struggles usually end with one victor. But must it also end with indefinite detention without trial? Must it end because of detention without trial? This becomes even more serious when it's not even a political struggle. My so-called Marxist conspirator friends were just working for social justice, for the cause of migrant workers, for the cause of the poor and the marginalized. They were Marxist conspirators in a network. The third story is about a doctor. I was in primary 1 then. In those days, many of us were poor. I had only one pair of socks to go to school with. I will wash them at night and we hope for them to dry. Next morning I will wear them and go to school. One day the socks did not dry in time, and so I went to school without socks. It so happened there was some kind of health check going on then. You know, in those days, there's no privacy for health checks, especially when you're 6 years old. The girls leave the room, and then the doctor sits at the teacher's desk and he asks you, okay, next, he calls your name, you go up, you open your shirt, stethoscope, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Then he pulls at your waistband, looks down there, and you say, cough. Then you go, So this was what happened, right? After coughing, he looked down and then he asked me, where are your socks? I said, wet lah. Primary 6, primary 1. Not even primary 6, 6 years old, primary 1. Wet lah. That doctor raised his left hand and slapped me so hard that my head hit the blackboard. I don't want to tell you what happened after that. There was no internet in those days. Nobody filmed it. Nobody to complain to. You just take it, right? But it tells me two things, two takeaways. One is the right that we must have when allegations are made to have those allegations heard, mediated or judged by impartial bodies. How else can justice be served? The people making the allegations have already made up the mind that you are guilty. Otherwise, why do they make those allegations? How then, in the name of justice, can the accuser be the judge as well? There is a need for impartiality when serious allegations are made, and this can only be made in a court of law by trained judges. Second takeaway is the arcade laws. Today, if the doctor whack your son like that, he's finished, That's an arcade law, right? And same thing, the ISA is an arcade law whose demise must come. Abolish the ISA, right? That doctor could do whatever he wanted with a 6-year-old in the past. But that must never happen again today. My fourth and final story is a story about my mother. My mother is 84 years old, but when she was 60 plus, she suffered from rheumatoid arthritis and she had to be in a wheelchair. She struggled so hard to get out of the wheelchair every day. And we wanted to bring her out to visit the gardens, to go shopping and all that. We always wanted to put her in a chair and bring her out. She refused. She refused to go out. She'd rather stay at home than sit in a wheelchair. Of course, we young people got frustrated. We don't want to sit in the house with her. Let's go on, Mom. No. Let's go on, Mom. Finally, she told me, human beings must stand up. Human beings must stand up and walk. I took that story, I take a lesson away from there. We are human beings. We are made to stand up for whatever we believe in. We walk. We stand up, we walk. We do not go in a wheelchair, which is so convenient because it will bring us to all the beautiful places, right? Do not do things for expediency. Do things because we are human beings. We have our dignity. Stand up and walk with us. Thank you.